If you are getting frustrated about how you are not improving with your art, then even making one of these art mistakes could prevent you from creating a realistic drawing. Mistake number 1. Not using guidelines. Rather than use grids to get an accurate outline of their drawings, most beginners prefer to draw freehand. But here's the thing, you already have so much on your plate. You're learning how to shade a face, how to draw accurate face outlines, how to shade the eyes, how to shade the nose, how to shade mouth, and yes, how can I forget? You're also battling with shading the hair. So the last thing you want to try is add to that problem by choosing to draw freehand. I used to spend hours upon hours trying to force myself to draw with the freehand method, and then at the end of the day, the drawing does not look like the reference photo. But don't get me wrong, drawing freehand is not bad. There are many professionals that draw using the freehand method, many other artists that are successful and they draw well with the freehand method. But my advice is that as a beginner, it might be better for you to consider using grids to actually draw your accurate outlines. Start off first with grids to get a feel of, of shading. Then later in the future, when you've become a little more familiar with things, you can begin to experiment with freehand. And this leads us to mistake number 2. Avoiding drawing things that you don't like to draw. Let's face it, hair is hard. No one likes to draw it. But just because something is hard, it doesn't mean that you have to entirely avoid it. I used to mess up my hair drawings. It was just too confusing. With all the lines, the shadows, the flows, it was just too complicated. And because of this, sometimes I avoided drawing hair by choosing to draw people with no hair, mostly bald men or bald women. And since I avoided drawing hair, I never got good at it. Hair was just this code that I could not crack. But that was until I decided to practice more, put more effort into learning it. I watched more tutorials on YouTube. In fact, sometimes I chose to draw a particular portrait because I wanted to draw that kind of hair. What was the result of all of this? Well, I still don't like drawing hair, but when it's time to draw hair for a portrait, I tackle it easily. Next mistake is shading with only HB pencils. Many beginners use HB pencils to shade their portraits. But here's the thing, for your drawings to look realistic, you need to have light, midtones, and shadows. And trust me, a flimsy HB pencil is not going to cut it. HB pencil is not enough to achieve all of that. You need other darker pencils that you can shade with, that you can use to build up layers. You will have to shade with your HB pencil, layer with that, also shade with your 2B pencil, also layer again with your 4B pencil. And that is how you create a realistic drawings, layering with other kinds of pencils, not just HB. And guess what? You don't even need to buy the complete set of pencils. You only need 2, 4, 6. A 2B pencil, a 4B pencil, and a 6B pencil. Some might want to go for an 8B pencil so that they can actually get more darker tones, but 246 will be fine. Next mistake is your drawing is lacking in contrast. Now, when I say contrast, I simply mean making your shadows darker and your highlights brighter. And adding enough contrast to your drawings is not hard at all. You simply just need to look for the darkest parts of your portraits and make them darker by shading. And most of the times these parts are the iris, the eyebrows. And now, rather than drawing these places with light graphite, you want to go for the darker graphite variations. Or better still, you'll be better off with using charcoal. If you don't have charcoal, that's fine. You can just use the darkest graphite pencils you can find. And when you're shading with the graphite, make sure to press hard on the areas that are darker. This will allow you to achieve darker tones in your drawings. Then for the highlights, you want to look for the parts of the face with the shine. Most of the times, this will be the iris, the nose, the forehead, the chin, and then the lips sometimes. And then when you found these areas that need highlights, you use your eraser to erase the darkness from them so that these places can actually shine. So doing this, you have much darker tones and much brighter tones. When these come together, you get a perfect looking portrait. Okay, not perfect, but good enough at least. The next mistake is drawing hard lines. Oh boy, I cannot start to tell you how many drawings of beginners I've seen who actually use lines to shape and to give the outline for their drawings. There's a quote that I heard once that stuck with me, and it says, "Draw what you see and not what you think you see." And when you look at your reference photos, do you actually see lines outlining the face? The answer is no. So if there aren't lines on your reference photo, don't add lines on your drawings and expect them to look realistic. When you add lines to your drawings, rather than it looking realistic, it will look much more like a cartoon. And it's because in real life, you don't see lines on the face. What you actually see is a soft finishing. So rather than use lines to shape and outline your face, try to use shading, tones, values instead. Now, the next mistake I see people make is not shading enough. I spoke of layering your shading before, and this is one mistake I see many beginners make. They only shade the bare minimum because they are afraid to shade more and ruin the whole thing. But creating a realistic drawing is not a shade once and you're done kind of thing. You need to layer your shading. You shade, you blend, you shade again, you blend again, and again you shade and you still blend, and then you shade till you realize that you also have to shade again. That's the process of creating a realistic drawing. And most beginners don't have the patience to follow this process of shading and blending and shading again. And when you just shade only once and then you're done with it, your shading will look flat and white. But it's not only about shading. You also have to pay attention to the techniques you use when you're shading. You know, the way you hold the pencil so that your drawings can become more realistic. And this video on the screen will teach you just that. Watch that. Yes, that. And I'll see you in the next one.